The thing about betrayal is that it starts small. A glance that lingers too long. A phone that faces down during dinner. A laugh that sounds different when she thinks you're not listening. For months, I told myself I was imagining things. That paranoia was just stress from work, from the mortgage, from life. But your gut knows before your brain catches up, and mine had been screaming for weeks. My name is Nathan Reed. I'm 34, and until 4 months ago, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Vanessa and I met 6 years ago at our friend Mike's wedding. She was the maid of honor, laughing at something the bride whispered in her ear, and when she looked up and caught me staring, her smile made my chest tight. We talked until the bar closed, then sat in my truck until sunrise, sharing stories and dreams like teenagers. She was beautiful, not just pretty, but the kind of beautiful that makes you feel lucky just to be in the same room. Dark hair that caught the light, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and this way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the world. We were inseparable after that. Late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, weekend trips to nowhere special, quiet dinners where we'd talk about everything and nothing. I proposed 18 months later at her family's lakeside cabin in Michigan, the same place her grandfather had proposed to her grandmother 50 years earlier. "Yes," she said before I finished asking the question, tears streaming down her face. The wedding was perfect. Small ceremony, close family and friends, dancing until the venue kicked us out. We honeymooned in Ireland, driving the countryside and staying in bed and breakfasts, where the owners treated us like their own children. We bought our house in suburban Columbus the following spring, a 3-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees that made the backyard feel like a secret garden. Vanessa loved hosting dinner parties, turning our dining room into something from a magazine with her attention to detail and genuine warmth. She worked as a hospital administrator at Ohio State's Medical Center, managing budgets and staff schedules with an efficiency that amazed me. I ran construction crews for a mid-sized development company, building shopping centers and office complexes around central Ohio. Our schedules meshed perfectly. Home by 6 most nights, weekends free for projects around the house, visiting family, or just being together. We talked about kids someday, maybe in a year or two, after we got the basement finished and her career stabilized. But somewhere in the last 4 months, the woman I married started disappearing. It began with her phone. Vanessa had always been casual about it, leaving it on counters, asking me to check messages while she drove. Suddenly, it was always face down, always within arm's reach, password protected with a code she'd never shared. When I asked about it, she'd shrug and say something about work requiring better security protocols. "The hospital's implementing new privacy measures," she explained one evening when I mentioned the change. "We have to be more careful with patient information." Then came the late nights. 3 times a week, sometimes 4, she'd text around 4:30 saying she had to stay late for budget meetings or staff issues. She'd come home after 9, claiming she'd grabbed something to eat at the hospital cafeteria, too tired to talk about her day. On these nights, she'd shower immediately, washing away the day before I could hold her, before we could reconnect. Our dinners became exercises in polite distance. She'd ask about my projects, and I'd tell her about foundation problems or permit delays, but her responses felt automatic, rehearsed. Her phone would buzz during our conversations, and though she wouldn't check it, I could see her attention drift toward the sound. When I'd try to talk about us, about the growing space between us, she'd get irritated, defensive. "You're being paranoid, Nathan," she'd say, her green eyes flashing with annoyance. "I'm just stressed with work. The hospital's going through restructuring and my department's under a microscope. Can't you be supportive instead of suspicious?" I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. We'd built something real together, a home, a future, a life that made sense. Her family adored me, treating me like the son they'd never had. My parents had fully embraced her, my mother frequently commenting on how lucky I was to find someone so perfect. Our friends saw us as the couple who had it figured out, the ones who made marriage look easy. But last Tuesday night changed everything. Vanessa was in the shower and her phone was charging on the nightstand. It buzzed with a text message and the preview lit up the screen. "Kelly, work. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Missed you so much." I stared at that message until the screen went black. Kelly was supposed to be a female colleague Vanessa had mentioned once or twice, someone from the budgeting department, but something about those words felt wrong. The intimacy of them, the longing. That night, lying next to my sleeping wife, I made a decision that would change everything. I had to know the truth. Whatever it cost me, whatever I found, I couldn't live with the doubt eating me alive from the inside. The perfect lie was about to unravel, and I was going to be the one pulling the thread. Sleep became impossible after that text message. For 2 days, I went through the motions of normal life. Job site meetings, progress reports, dinners with my wife, while my mind churned with possibilities I didn't want to consider. Vanessa seemed lighter somehow, humming while she got dressed for work, smiling at nothing while she made coffee. The woman who'd been distant and irritable for months was suddenly radiant, and that terrified me more than her previous coldness. Wednesday night, she claimed another late meeting. Thursday, a mandatory training session that would run until 8. Both nights, she came home showered and glowing, too tired for conversation, but somehow energized in a way I hadn't seen in years. Friday night, she fell asleep early, exhausted from what she called the longest week ever. I waited until her breathing deepened into the rhythm of true sleep, then carefully lifted her phone from the nightstand. My hands shook as I carried it to the garage, closing the door behind me like I was committing a crime. Her passcode was our anniversary, June 15th, 2019. The irony of that nearly broke me before I'd even started looking. I opened her messages and found Kelly, work, at the top of the list. My finger hovered over the name for a full minute before I found the courage to tap it. There was no Kelly. The contact was a man named Derek Holloway, and their conversation thread stretched back 4 months. 4 months of lies, starting innocent enough, work complaints, commiseration about difficult days, but escalating quickly into territory that made my stomach turn. Compliments about her smile, inside jokes about coworkers they apparently both knew, late-night conversations that grew increasingly intimate. I read every word, my world crumbling with each exchange. Messages where she called me predictable and boring, where she complained about feeling trapped in our suburban life. Photos that made me want to smash the phone against the garage wall. Pictures of my wife in lingerie I'd never seen, taken in what looked like hotel rooms. The worst part wasn't the explicit content. It was the casual cruelty of her words about our marriage, about me. He has no idea, she'd written 3 weeks ago. He trusts me completely. It's actually kind of pathetic how naive he is. I could probably stay out all night and he'd believe any excuse I gave him. Derek had replied, "Poor guy. But his loss is my gain. Can't wait to have you all to myself this weekend." That weekend. The weekend she'd told me she was visiting her college roommate in Cleveland. She'd been gone from Friday evening until Sunday afternoon, claiming her friend needed emotional support during a difficult divorce. I'd sent flowers to her hotel as a surprise, wanting to show I supported her being there for a friend in need. She'd never mentioned receiving them. I scrolled back through weeks of messages, watching the evolution of their relationship. Derek was 28, worked in pharmaceutical sales, single and apparently proud of it. His social media, which I accessed through links he'd sent her, painted the picture of a man who thought he was God's gift to women. Gym selfies, expensive dinners, posts about living life to the fullest and taking what you want. He'd taken my wife. But more than that, he'd shown her how to lie to me with surgical precision. Every excuse she'd given me for the last 4 months was planned, rehearsed, coordinated with him. The late meetings were dinners at restaurants downtown. The training sessions were afternoons at hotels near his apartment. The weekend with her college friend was 2 days at a cabin he'd rented, where they'd played house while I worked overtime to surprise her with a bathroom renovation she'd mentioned wanting. I took screenshots of everything. Hundreds of messages, photos, GPS locations from when they'd shared their whereabouts with each other. I saved them to a cloud account she didn't know existed, organized them chronologically, backed them up to external drives. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. By the time I crept back into our bedroom and placed her phone exactly where I'd found it, the sun was rising. Vanessa stirred as I slipped under the covers, rolling toward me with a sleepy smile. "Morning," she whispered, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. "Love you." I stared at the ceiling and managed to whisper back, Love you too. It was the last lie I would tell her. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own life. I went to work, managed my crews, handled problems and deadlines with mechanical efficiency. I came home, made dinner, watched television beside my wife while she texted with her lover. I kissed her goodnight and lay awake listening to her breathe, planning what came next, because something was coming. Vanessa had made her choice, and Derek had made his. They'd chosen to destroy my life piece by piece while smiling to my face and lying with practiced ease. Now it was my turn to choose, and I chose war. The old Nathan would have confronted her immediately, would have thrown the evidence at her feet and demanded explanations, apologies, some kind of acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. The old Nathan believed in fair fights and second chances, in the power of truth to heal wounds. But the old Nathan was dead. In his place was someone colder, more calculating, someone who understood that mercy was a luxury I could no longer afford. I spent 3 days researching Derek Holloway, social media profiles, professional networks, public records. I learned he lived in a trendy apartment complex in the short north, drove a leased BMW, and had a pattern of dating multiple women simultaneously based on his Instagram history. I found his work address, his favorite restaurants, his gym schedule. I studied him like a target, memorizing his habits and weaknesses. More importantly, I studied his arrogance. Every post, every photo, every comment revealed a man who believed he was untouchable, who thought other men were just obstacles to be maneuvered around, who saw married women as conquests rather than human beings with real lives and families who loved them. Derek Holloway was about to learn differently. My plan began with a simple suggestion to Vanessa over breakfast on a Thursday morning. She was scrolling through her phone, probably reading good morning texts from her lover, when I said casually, "We should have your parents over for dinner this weekend, and Jason too. It's been ages since we've all been together." She looked up, startled. "This weekend?" I nodded, buttering my toast with deliberate calm. "Saturday night. I'll make that pot roast your dad loves. We'll open a nice bottle of wine. Actually use the dining room for once." I smiled, the expression feeling foreign on my face. "I know things have been stressful for you at work lately. Might be nice to just relax with family." Vanessa's eyes searched my face for some hidden meaning, but I'd perfected the art of appearing normal over the past weeks. That sounds really nice, actually," she replied slowly. "Mom's been asking when we'll have them over again." "Perfect," I said. "I'll call them tonight." That evening, while Vanessa showered, I accessed her phone one more time. I'd become an expert at navigating her messages quickly, finding what I needed without leaving digital fingerprints. Derek's contact information was easy to locate, and crafting the message was even easier. I typed in Vanessa's voice, using phrases and mannerisms I'd memorized from weeks of reading her betrayal. "Hey, babe. So I had this crazy idea. Nathan and I talked, and he's more open-minded than I thought. He knows about us, and he wants to meet you. I think he's interested in some kind of arrangement where we're all adults about this. Want to come to dinner Saturday night? I'll introduce you to my family as a friend first. See how things go. This could actually work out perfectly for everyone. 7 p.m. at our place. Trust me on this." Derek's response came within minutes. "Holy shit. Seriously? I knew he'd come around eventually. Guy like that doesn't deserve a woman like you anyway. Yeah, I'm in. This is going to be amazing. See you Saturday, beautiful." I deleted the entire exchange, leaving no trace of our communication. Vanessa would have no warning, no chance to prepare or prevent what was coming. Derek would show up expecting a progressive, open-minded husband ready to negotiate his wife's affections like a business deal. Instead, he'd walk into a room full of people who loved me, who trusted Vanessa, who had no idea their perfect family was built on months of lies and betrayal. The rest of the week passed in careful preparation. I called Vanessa's parents, Robert and Linda, warm people who'd welcomed me into their family from day one. Robert was a retired electrician who treated me like the son he'd never had, always ready with advice about home repairs or life in general. "We'd love to come over," Linda said when I called. "It's been too long since we've all been together." "I'll bring my tools," Robert added in the background. "Finally fix that loose banister we've been talking about." I called Jason, Vanessa's younger brother, a former college linebacker who now ran his own auto repair shop. He idolized his sister, frequently telling me how lucky I was to marry the best woman in the world. He'd been my best man, had cried during his speech about gaining a brother he'd always wanted. "Count me in," he said immediately when I invited him. "I'll bring beer and stories from the shop." Their excitement felt like acid in my stomach, but I pushed through it. This wasn't about hurting them. They deserved to know the truth about who their daughter really was, even if the revelation would devastate them. Saturday arrived gray and cold, typical Ohio autumn weather that matched my mood. I spent the day cooking, pot roast with vegetables, fresh bread, all of Vanessa's favorite comfort foods. She helped with the preparations, seeming genuinely happy for the first time in months. "This is so nice," she said, while arranging flowers she'd bought at the grocery store. "I can't remember the last time we had everyone over." She hummed while she set the table, chatting about how good it would be to see everyone together. Her phone buzzed periodically throughout the day, and each time I knew it was Derek, confirming details for an evening he thought would change his life for the better. He was right about that much. At 6:30, Vanessa's family began arriving. Hugs and laughter filled our entryway, the warmth of people who genuinely loved each other. Linda brought her famous apple pie, Jason carried in beer and stories from the shop. Robert immediately headed for his loose banister with a toolbox. "This smells incredible," Linda said, hugging me tight. "You've outdone yourself." The house filled with the sounds of family, casual conversation, gentle teasing, the comfortable rhythms of people who'd known each other for years. Vanessa was radiant, playing hostess with natural grace, and for a moment I almost felt guilty for what was about to happen. Almost. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I announced, setting down my beer and walking toward the front door with steady steps. Behind me, the conversation continued. Linda telling Jason about her latest book club selection, Robert examining the crown molding he'd helped me install 2 years ago, Vanessa laughing at something her mother said, the sound of family, of trust, of people who believed in the goodness of others. It was about to end. I opened the door to find Derek Holloway exactly as I'd expected, confident, well-dressed, holding a bottle of expensive wine like an offering. He was taller than I'd anticipated from his photos, maybe 6'2", with the kind of lean build that suggested regular gym attendance and careful attention to appearance. His smile was wide and practiced, the expression of a man who'd never met a situation he couldn't charm his way through. "Nathan," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends meeting for drinks. "Great to finally meet you, man. Vanessa's told me so much about you." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact, the casual assumption that I was just another obstacle he'd successfully navigated. "Derek," I replied evenly. "She's mentioned you too. Come on in." He stepped across the threshold, still radiating confidence, taking in our home with the appraising eye of someone mentally cataloging what he might soon have access to. The living room was warm and inviting, filled with the people who mattered most to my wife, and Derek surveyed them like a king examining his future subjects. "Everyone," I announced, my voice carrying easily over the family chatter, "I'd like you to meet Derek Holloway. He's a close friend of Vanessa's from work." The conversation died instantly. Every pair of eyes turned toward our unexpected guest, expressions ranging from polite curiosity to confusion. I watched Vanessa's face drain of color, watched her mouth open slightly as if to speak, then close again when no words came. Her wine glass trembled in her hand. Derek, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, stepped forward with that practiced smile. "Hey, everyone," he said with casual confidence. "Thanks for having me. This is really nice of you all." Robert stood from the couch, ever the gracious host, despite his confusion. "Nice to meet you, son," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert, Vanessa's father." He shook Derek's hand, studying him with the careful attention of a man who'd raised a daughter and knew when something wasn't quite right. Linda offered a polite hello, her maternal instincts clearly picking up on the tension radiating from her daughter. "It's lovely to meet you, Derek," she said, though her voice carried a note of uncertainty. Jason remained leaning against the kitchen counter, beer bottle frozen halfway to his lips, eyes moving between Derek and Vanessa with growing suspicion. "Derek," I continued, gesturing toward the dining table where I'd carefully arranged place settings for everyone. Why don't you have a seat right here? You're our guest of honor tonight." He moved toward the table, still smiling, still playing the role of the charming dinner guest. Vanessa remained frozen by the kitchen doorway, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. I could practically hear her mind racing, trying to figure out how much I knew, what I was planning, how to minimize the damage about to unfold. I walked to the side table where I'd placed a leather portfolio earlier, retrieving it with the calm deliberation of a prosecutor approaching the bench. The room had gone completely silent now, family members sensing that something significant was about to happen, but unsure what or why. "I wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began, standing at the head of the table like a host about to offer a toast. "There's something important I need to share with all of you, something that Vanessa and I have been dealing with privately, but I think it's time the truth came out." "Nathan!" Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper, a desperate attempt to stop what she could see coming. I looked directly at her, my expression calm and implacable. "Vanessa has been having an affair," I announced, "for 4 months, with Derek." The words hit the room like a physical force. Linda gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth, the color draining from her face. Robert's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, a father's protective rage mixed with devastating disappointment. Jason straightened, his beer bottle hitting the counter with a sharp crack that made everyone jump. Derek's confidence finally cracked. "What the hell?" he started. "These," I continued, opening the portfolio and placing the first printed screenshot on the table, "are text messages between my wife and Derek. Messages where she talks about how boring our marriage is, how naive I am, how easy it is to lie to me." I spread out the evidence methodically. Dozens of screenshots, printed emails, photos she'd sent him from our bedroom, GPS location data showing their meetings at hotels across the city. Each piece of paper landed on the table with a soft whisper that somehow felt deafening in the absolute silence. "This message here," I said, pointing to one particularly damning exchange, "is from 3 weeks ago. Vanessa telling Derek how pathetic it is that I trust her completely, how I'd believe any excuse she gave me." Vanessa was sobbing now, harsh, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. "Nathan, please," she choked out. "You don't understand." "And this," I continued relentlessly, placing down a photo, "is a picture she sent Derek last Tuesday afternoon, from our bedroom, while I was working late to finish a project early so I could surprise her with dinner." Linda turned away, unable to look at the evidence of her daughter's betrayal. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice breaking. Robert's hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles had gone white. The disappointment on his face was more devastating than any anger could have been. Derek had backed toward the door, his arrogance completely evaporated. "Listen, this is crazy," he stammered. "She said you guys were separated. She said you were cool with this." "She said what?" My voice cut through his stammering like a blade. "That her husband was okay with his wife sneaking around behind his back? That we had some kind of arrangement?" I held up my phone, showing the message thread I'd created. "I sent you that message, Derek," I said with cold satisfaction, "using her phone to get you here, so everyone could see exactly what kind of man you are." The realization hit him like a physical blow. His face went ashen as he understood the trap he'd walked into, the magnitude of his miscalculation. He turned toward the door, but Jason was already there, 6 feet of former linebacker muscle blocking his exit. "Where do you think you're going?" Jason asked, his voice low and dangerous. "You thought this was a game," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You thought you could walk into my house, sleep with my wife, and face no consequences. You thought wrong." What happened next was swift and brutal. Derek tried to push past Jason, but my brother-in-law grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You piece of shit," Jason growled, his face inches from Derek's. Robert joined him, 65 years old but still strong from decades of manual labor, his face a mask of paternal fury. "You came into my daughter's home," Robert said, his voice barely controlled. "You disrespected my family, my son-in-law, my daughter's marriage. You thought there wouldn't be consequences?" The beating that followed wasn't long, but it was thorough enough to ensure Derek understood that some actions have prices that can't be negotiated or charmed away. When they finally let him go, he stumbled out our front door bloody, humiliated and broken, never to return to our lives. Vanessa collapsed into a dining room chair, surrounded by the wreckage of her choices and the silence of her family's devastation. Linda couldn't look at her own daughter. Robert stared at her like she was a stranger. Jason shook his head in disgust and walked out to the porch, unable to be in the same room. I stood in the center of it all, the portfolio still in my hands, and looked down at the woman I'd loved completely for 6 years. "I filed for divorce yesterday," I said quietly. "My lawyer has copies of everything. You'll be hearing from him Monday morning. Pack your things and get out of my house." I turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her surrounded by the ruins of her perfect lie and the family whose love and respect she'd destroyed forever. The revenge was complete, but somehow it felt like just the beginning. 3 months later, I sit on the back deck of my house now, watching the November sun set through bare oak branches. The divorce was finalized last week, a swift and merciless legal execution made possible by the mountain of evidence I'd gathered. Vanessa's lawyer advised her to settle quickly and quietly, knowing that any court battle would only expose her further and cost her what little dignity remained. She got nothing. The house, the savings, the life we'd built, all of it stayed with me. Ohio's adultery laws are clear about consequences, and the evidence was overwhelming. Her affair wasn't just betrayal. It was legally documented abandonment of our marriage. The aftermath rippled through every corner of her life like a stone thrown into still water. Her parents barely speak to her now. Linda called me 2 weeks after that dinner, crying. "I'm so sorry," she said through her tears. "You didn't deserve this. You've always been like a son to us, and that won't change because of what she did." Robert stopped by to help with some repairs, working in silence for hours before finally speaking. "You deserved better than what she gave you," he said quietly. "We all did." Jason refuses to see her entirely. The sister he'd idolized, the woman he'd called perfect at our wedding, was revealed to be someone he couldn't reconcile with his own values. Their relationship may never recover. Derek vanished from Columbus entirely, transferred to his company's West Coast division within 2 weeks of that dinner. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd left town with 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and a reputation that preceded him to his new office. Some mistakes follow you across state lines. Vanessa tried to apologize once, showing up at the house a month ago with tears and promises of counseling, begging for another chance. "Nathan, please," she pleaded from my doorstep. "We can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can go to counseling." I stood in the doorway of the home we'd shared and said 5 words. "You made your choice. Leave." I closed the door and watched through the window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes, crying, before finally driving away. I'm not the same man I was 6 months ago. That version of Nathan died the night I read those text messages, replaced by someone harder, more cautious, less willing to trust blindly. Some nights I miss him, the man who believed in unconditional love and happy endings, who thought good people always win if they just try hard enough. But I don't regret what I did. Vanessa chose her path when she chose Derek over our marriage, over our vows, over the life we'd built together. I simply made sure everyone knew the truth. I'm rebuilding now, one deliberate step at a time. New routines, new goals, new ways of seeing the world that don't include her shadow. I've started dating again, carefully, slowly, with the hard-won wisdom of someone who's learned that trust must be earned rather than given freely. The future looks different than I'd planned, but it's mine again. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some wounds never fully heal, but some men refuse to be broken.